before the thunder of panzers shattered the silence of the Carpathians, before the swastika flew over Budapest, and long before the Red Army's tanks rolled through the ruins of a broken capital, there existed a nation forged in humiliation yet burning with unquenchable pride. Hungary, a land once the heart of a thousand-year-old kingdom, reduced by the Treaty of Trianon in 1920 to a rump state with two-thirds of its territory and population severed overnight, entered the 20th century not as a conqueror, but as a ghost. Yet from that ghost would rise not only soldiers, but scientists, scholars, and athletes who would defy the world's expectations. To ask whether Hungary was stronger than Italy in World War II is to miss the point entirely. Strength is not measured only in divisions or dreadnoughts, but in the will to rebuild, to excel, and to endure when the odds say you should vanish. And Hungary did not vanish. It fought, not always wisely, not always victoriously, but with a spirit so fierce that even its enemies took notice. When Nazi Germany annexed Austria in March 1938 through the Anschluss, the world watched with bated breath. But few paid attention to the quiet tremors in Budapest. While Hitler marched unopposed into Vienna, Hungary's military stood at a humiliating nadir. Just 7 infantry brigades and 2 cavalry brigades, totaling barely 35,000 men, the exact ceiling imposed by the Treaty of Trianon. That treaty, signed in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, lesser-known sibling in the Palace of Trianon, had not only carved up the Kingdom of Hungary like a carcass, but also forbidden it from possessing tanks, heavy artillery, or even a proper air force. Conscription banned. National defense reduced to ceremonial pretense. For nearly 2 decades, Hungary was a sovereign state with the military of a Swiss canton, armed with little more than national shame and simmering irredentism. And yet, within that humiliation lay the seeds of an astonishing transformation. It was in this crucible of restriction that Hungary turned its wounds into weapons of a different kind. While its neighbors, the so-called Little Entente of Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia, watched with suspicion, Budapest funneled over 25% of its national income not into guns, but into minds and muscles. Education became a national crusade. By the mid-1930s, Hungary boasted a literacy rate exceeding 90%, a figure that dwarfed many Western democracies. Sports, too, were treated as matters of state. The government built stadiums, funded coaches, and identified young talent with the same rigor it would later apply to artillery production. The result? A golden generation. In 1936, Hungarian athletes stunned Berlin by securing 3rd place in the Olympic medal tally, behind only the United States and Nazi Germany itself. In 1937, Dr. Albert Szent-Györgyi, working in a modest laboratory in Szeged under full state funding, received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for his discovery of vitamin C. To this day, he remains the only Hungarian Nobel laureate whose breakthrough was entirely nurtured by the Hungarian state, a testament to what a nation can achieve when it invests in human capital even as its sovereignty is shackled. But the world was not kind to scholars and sprinters. By 1938, the drums of war drowned out the cheers of stadiums. The Bled Agreement of August 22, 1938, marked a turning point. For the first time since 1920, the Little Entente formally acknowledged Hungary's right to rearm. It was a reluctant concession, born more of fear of German expansion than respect for Budapest, but it was enough. Within weeks, the Hungarian government activated the Győr Program, a secret rearmament initiative already underway in whispers and basements. Named after the industrial city of Győr, this plan allocated 1 billion pengos, 5 times the pre-1930s military budget, to modernize every branch of the armed forces. Factories that once produced agricultural tools began casting artillery shells. Aerodromes emerged on the Great Hungarian Plain. By 1940, Hungary had not only broken the Trianon shackles but fielded a mechanized corps, a fledgling air force of over 500 aircraft, many domestically designed, and an army that had swelled to over 300,000 men. It was a miracle of national will, but miracles, as history teaches, are not enough against the tide of global war. Yet even as Hungary rebuilt its military, it remained trapped in a geopolitical vice. Sandwiched between Nazi Germany to the west and Stalin's USSR to the east, and surrounded by neighbors who had profited from its dismemberment, Budapest walked a razor's edge. Regent Miklos Horthy, a naval admiral with no sea to command, sought to restore lost territories through diplomacy and opportunism, not outright war. And for a time, it worked. Through the First and Second Vienna Awards, 1938 and 1940, mediated by Hitler and Mussolini, Hungary regained southern Slovakia and northern Transylvania without firing a shot. But every territorial gain came at the price of deeper entanglement with the Axis. By 1941, Hungary was no longer merely aligned, it was complicit. When Germany invaded Yugoslavia in April 1941, Hungarian troops crossed the border, not to fight Germans, but to reclaim regions lost in 1920. It was a Pyrrhic victory, popular at home, damning abroad. And soon, the bill would come due. Italy, by comparison, entered the war with a colonial empire, a navy that rivaled Britain's in the Mediterranean, and an army of over 1.5 million men. Mussolini dreamed of a new Roman Empire. But dreams crumble under the weight of poor logistics, outdated tactics, and fragile morale. Italy's military, though larger, was plagued by corruption, underfunded industry, and strategic incoherence. In contrast, Hungary's smaller force was leaner, more motivated by national restoration, and, crucially, better integrated with German operational planning. Hungarian pilots flew with distinction on the Eastern Front. Their 1st Armored Division held key positions during the Battle of the Don, and their cavalry units, though anachronistic, proved shockingly effective in the fluid warfare of the Ukrainian steppes. But numbers matter. Hungary never fielded more than 1 million men total during the entire war, less than a third of Italy's peak strength. And while Italy possessed battleships, submarines, and colonial garrisons, Hungary had no navy at all and only a token air force by 1944. The comparison, then, is not one of strength, but of context. Hungary was a wounded phoenix trying to rise. Italy was a fading lion roaring at ghosts. The true tragedy of Hungary in World War II lies not in its battlefield performance, but in its moral descent. Initially, Budapest resisted full participation in the Holocaust. Horthy's government enacted anti-Jewish laws, yes, but balked at mass deportations. That changed in March 1944, when Hitler, fearing Hungary's wavering loyalty, occupied the country in Operation Margarethi. With German SS units now in control, over 430,000 Hungarian Jews were deported to Auschwitz in just a few months, most murdered upon arrival. It was the fastest, most efficient genocide of the entire war. And yet, even in this darkness, Hungarians resisted. Diplomats like Raoul Wallenberg, though Swedish, operating in Budapest, and countless ordinary citizens hid Jews, forged documents, and risked everything. The Arrow Cross takeover in October 1944 unleashed further terror, but also galvanized underground resistance. Budapest became a city of shadows, where courage flickered in basements and attics. This duality, complicity and heroism, collaboration and defiance, is the true measure of Hungary's wartime soul. By 1943, the tide had turned. The Hungarian Second Army, over 200,000 strong, was annihilated at the Battle of Stalingrad's periphery during the Soviet counteroffensive at the Don River. Of those sent east, fewer than 40,000 returned. Entire regiments vanished into the Russian winter. The loss was catastrophic, not just militarily but psychologically. Hungary had sacrificed its youth for a cause that was never truly its own. And yet, even in defeat, the nation's spirit did not break. Returning soldiers brought back not just trauma, but a new awareness. That blind loyalty to Berlin was national suicide. Whispers of armistice with the Allies grew louder. In 1944, Horthy secretly negotiated peace, but Hitler struck first. The occupation of Hungary was swift, brutal, and total. The country became a battlefield not just between Axis and Allies, but between its own future and its past. What is often forgotten is that Hungary's contribution to the Allied victory came not from its tanks, but from its thinkers. The Martians, as Leo Szilard, Edward Teller, John von Neumann, and Eugene Wigner were called, were Hungarian-born physicists who fled fascism and helped build the atomic bomb. Von Neumann's game theory shaped Cold War strategy. Szilard conceived the nuclear chain reaction. Teller became the father of the hydrogen bomb. These were not accidental exiles. They were products of the very educational system Budapest had nurtured under Trianon's constraints. Hungary lost its sons, but the world gained their genius. And in Hungary itself, scientists like St. Georgi turned from vitamins to resistance, using his Nobel prestige to shield dissidents and later founding the Hungarian Democratic Independence Front. Knowledge, it turned out, was the ultimate weapon, one that no treaty could ban. Meanwhile, on the cultural front, Hungary continued to astonish. The 1938 FIFA World Cup final in Paris saw the Hungarian national team, nicknamed the Magical Magyars a decade before their 1950 zenith, battle Italy in a match drenched in political symbolism. Fascist Italy, backed by Mussolini himself, sought global validation through sport. Hungary, representing a wounded democracy flirting with authoritarianism, played with fire and grace. Though they lost 4-2 after extra time, the Hungarians earned the world's respect. Their style, fluid, technical, cerebral, was a preview of the football revolution they would lead in the 1950s. That team was more than athletes. They were ambassadors of a nation that refused to be defined by its borders or its defeats. As 1944 bled into 1945, Budapest became the epicenter of Europe's final agony. The 50-day siege of Budapest, beginning in late December 1944, saw the city reduced to rubble as Soviet and Romanian forces encircled German and Hungarian defenders. Civilians starved in cellars. Snipers ruled the rooftops. The chain bridge, once a symbol of unity between Buda and Pest, lay in twisted metal. Over 38,000 civilians died. Yet amid the carnage, moments of humanity flared. Hungarian nurses tended to wounded Soviets. Jewish doctors saved Arrow Cross soldiers. Ordinary citizens shared bread with enemies. When the city finally fell in February 1945, it was not with a surrender, but with silence. The silence of a people who had given everything and lost almost all. Over 900,000 Hungarians died in the war, nearly 10% of the population. The cost was unimaginable. But the story does not end in ashes. In the ruins of 1945, Hungary faced a new occupier, the Soviet Union. Yet the spirit that had survived Trianon, the Depression, and the Holocaust would not be extinguished. That same resilience fueled the 1956 uprising, a spontaneous revolt against communist tyranny that, though crushed by tanks, inspired the world. The seeds of that defiance were planted in the 1930s, when a nation with no army built libraries instead. When it couldn't field tanks, it built stadiums. When it was forbidden to defend its borders, it defended its mind. Italy may have had more divisions, more battleships, more colonies, but Hungary had something rarer: the ability to regenerate its soul even as its body was broken. Today, Hungarians, and all who admire the quiet strength of small nations, have every right to feel pride. Not pride in conquest, but in survival. Not in empire, but in excellence. From Nobel laureates to Olympic titans, from football legends to atomic pioneers, Hungary's 20th century legacy is one of disproportionate impact. The Treaty of Trianon sought to erase Hungary from the map of great nations. Instead, it forced the country to redefine greatness itself, not through territory, but through talent, not through force, but through fortitude. The soldiers of the Royal Hungarian Army may have been outgunned, but their nation's true army, the teachers, scientists, artists, and athletes, outlasted every invader. And that is a victory no peace treaty can revoke. So, was Hungary stronger than Italy in World War II? Militarily, no. But in the deeper currents of history, the ones that shape civilizations long after the last tank is rusted, Hungary proved that true strength lies not in how many you conquer, but in how much you endure, create, and preserve. And for that, every Hungarian, past, present, and future, should stand tall.